Philippians chapter 3, we're looking at verse 12. If you're there, say I'm there. Not that I have already obtained this or am already perfect, but I press on to make it my own, because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Amen. Andre, how much time do I have? I mean, like, what's like average-ish? Half hour? Okay. Up to half hour is good? Okay. All right. I like it. Okay. So up to half hour is what we'll plan for, if that's okay. All right. Maybe a little bit less. So I want to share a couple of things with you guys, then we'll pray. The thoughts that I want to share with you tonight are actually very simple. Before that, I want to tell you guys a little story. Yesterday, I was showing a house. So as my job, I'm a real estate broker, and yesterday I was showing a house, and it was a badly damaged home. It was burned in a fire, which, if you're a real estate investor, you know that could be potentially a really great purchase to make. And so I went there with a good friend of mine, one of my clients, and we're walking through the home. Before you go into this home, you have to sign a waiver. It's called a hold harmless agreement, that if you get injured in this home, you will not sue the owner of the home. And this is actually very typical for homes like these, because especially fire damaged homes, because the floors are burnt through. And so if you make your way up to like the second or third floor, you're walking around and there's big holes all throughout the floor. And so you have to really watch your step. And then also in a fire damaged home, the power's out. There are no utilities connected anymore. And so you can't turn on the light to see where you're going. And so we had our phones out, and we're kind of navigating our way through the house. Anytime I sign one of these forms, this hold harmless agreement, I never think twice about it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. I've never been injured in a home. I don't really worry about these types of things. And so we're walking through the house, and some other agents pull up, and they want to take a tour. And so they're like knocking on the door. They're like, hey, can we get in here? And at this point, we're on the second floor, and we have to walk down the staircase, and it's like a spirally, very narrow staircase. And the stairs are also burnt through, so you kind of feel a little unstable as you're walking down the stairs. And so I go first, and I'm walking down, and I drop something on the stairs, and I lean to pick it up, and I lean down, and I kind of turn my foot, and I feel like this stabbing pain in my leg. And I get a little bit nervous, I kind of walk out. It's super dark, you walk outside, it's all sunny. And the windows are all boarded shut, so it's like pitch black in this house. And I walk out, and I look at the bottom of my foot, and I have a screw sticking out of my foot. Yeah, I was thinking to myself, like, oh, God, please don't let it be a nail. Because, you hear bad stories about you stepping on, like, rusty nails. But good thing it wasn't a nail, it was a screw. And so I gently, like, unscrewed it, pulled it out. And I looked at it, and I was thinking to myself, man, I really hope this is, like, a new screw. Because you don't want to get, like, rust into your leg. And I look at it, and it is the most rusty screw I have ever seen in my life. I mean, if you Google rusty screw, I'm sure this would be like the top screw on there. It made it into this home. And so I'm like, man, this is great. Yeah, and I've been sick a little bit lately, so I feel like my immune system hasn't been where it needs to be. I've gotten sick like 3 times in the last couple of months. And so I call my wife. She works at the hospital. This is important. So I'm driving home, and I'm like, hey, I stepped on a rusty. Have any of you guys ever done that? Stepped on a rusty nail or screw? No way. You had to get what? Oh, wow. That is serious. You were telling me it's not that serious. All right, so So I talked to her on the phone, and she's like, "You should probably get a tetanus shot." Did you get a tetanus shot when you had this? Oh, okay. You've had a tetanus shot? Well, what did you get a tetanus shot for? Really? Was this a long time ago? Oh man. Yeah, so, and I'm driving home, I'm Googling tetanus shots, the vaccines, all the ingredients. I'm getting a little nervous and uncomfortable, but we end up, and I was supposed to teach at Bible college last night. And so I pick up Viola, we drive to urgent care, they examine my foot, they give me a tetanus shot. But while I was there, I remembered something else, and this is what it was all leading up to. I remember I had a friend once, and he shared with me a situation that he encountered at the emergency room that made him realize a couple of things about life. When we were there in urgent care, we walk in, and she asked me to step on the scale. She's like trying to measure my height, and I'm telling her, I'm like, yeah, I'm not really interested in this. I have to be in Tacoma by 7:30. It's almost 7 o'clock. You really need my height right now? And she's like, "No, sir. Every time you come in, we have to take your weight and your height." And so my friend, he was telling me one time his child gets sick, really, really sick. A young family, young couple. They have a little boy, and he gets really, really sick. And so, they're taking his temperature. They're giving him medicine. Nothing seems to be helping. And so they come to a place where they're like, we should probably take him to the ER. They pack up the car. They load up. It's late at night. They head to the ER. And the ER, for some reason, that night is packed. It's absolutely full. I mean, they're looking around for places to sit. It's that full. And so they're walking around. They finally find some seats. He's standing. Wife is sitting, holding their son. He comes up to the check-in area. He says, "Hey, my son is really, really sick. Can you guys get him in, please? It's serious. It's urgent." They take his information. They talk with him for a few minutes. And they ask him to take a seat and wait to be called. So he takes a seat, and he's waiting to be called. I think he said 2 hours went by. A long time goes by. And nothing. He's been up and down checking in with the intake nurse, and nothing. Like, "Sir, please take your seat. There are a lot of people here that are injured." And he's looking at his son, and he's not looking very good. Finally, the nurse ends up calling them and takes them into an exam room. They walk into the exam room, and they sit there for like another 30 minutes. At this point, they're super frustrated. His son seems to be unresponsive. Like, they're trying to get his attention, trying to keep him awake. I mean, they're terrified. Your little boy isn't feeling well. They're absolutely scared. And finally, somebody walks in to their exam room. She walks into the exam room, and she says, "Hey, I'd like to weigh your son and get his height." And at this point, he finally loses it. He's like, "What do you mean my son's weight and height? I mean, look at him. He is so sick. We've been sitting in the waiting room for 2 hours. I've been sitting in this exam room for another half hour. I'm not curious or interested to know what his weight is or what his height is. I need you to treat my son. He's super sick right now. I mean, we're worried for him. Can you give him some medicine? Can you get a doctor in here? We're really concerned, and you guys haven't been doing a great job. I don't need his weight, and I don't need his height." And she said something to him that he thought was really interesting. She said, "Sir, every time you bring your child in to see the doctor, we're going to take his measurements. We're going to check his weight, and we're going to check his height. Because we know that if your child is not growing, that could be the cause of their illness." He said, "Your growth is directly related to your health. If you are not growing, you are not healthy." And this is especially important in young people and young children. If they're not growing, they are not healthy. And so I want us to step out of the ER for a moment and step into the church. I think that this relates very well to you and I. My friend, if you are not growing in your relationship with God, then you are not healthy. Because just like in life, so it is in your spirit. If you are not growing, then you are not healthy. Health is directly related to growth. It is God's expectation that you would grow in Him. A lot of us, when we get saved, we get really excited about our salvation. I mean, we're so excited. We get saved. We have some really great times of worship. We come to church for a while, and that is awesome. But a lot of us, there comes a moment that we stop growing. And that is the frustration that the author of Hebrews has in chapter 5. He says, I was here recently, and now I've come back. And he said, y'all are still in the same place. Nothing has changed. I was here a while ago. I left. I came back. Nothing has changed. You're still at the same place you were 5 years ago. You're still at the same place you were when you got saved. And the author of Hebrews knows that health is directly related to growth. If your spirit is not growing, if your relationship with God is not growing, my friend, you are not healthy. A lot of times we determine our level of spirituality by maybe the volume of our prayers, by how dynamic worship was, or by how we responded to the sermon. But a lot of those are not indications of our growth. They're not indications of our growth or our health. And so I want us to look at just a couple of things, super simple. I want us to look at a few things that cause you and I, or inhibit our growth, cause you and I to stop growing or inhibit our growth. So sometimes, when we try to gauge whether or not we've grown spiritually, we try to look at things to blame for why we haven't. So I think one of the most common things that you and I blame for our lack of growth is probably the church. So if you were to ask yourself, have I grown spiritually in the last year? We're approaching January. We're all going to reevaluate our lives, set New Year's resolutions. And we're probably, or should be, asking ourselves, have I grown? Have I grown within the last year? Have I matured spiritually? Have I become a more godly man or a more godly woman? Have I seen this in my life? And sometimes when the answer is no, we like to blame people, or we like to blame things. And the first thing we like to blame is the church. I haven't grown because my church isn't spiritual enough, or youth services haven't been good enough, or Andre hasn't been preaching sermons that impact my spirit and allow me to grow. A lot of times when we evaluate our growth, we begin to blame our youth pastor, our youth ministry, our church leadership, our congregation, and everybody besides ourselves. But you and I, we have to remember that the church, it is the sum of its parts. Right? So sometimes you and I will come to church and we'll say, man, that prayer was so weak today. Man, why weren't you praying? Like, who was stopping you from praying? Like, if the prayer was weak, if the church prayer was weak, you are the church. It was weak because of you. Man, worship was so dry. Why weren't you worshiping? Why weren't you praising? Why weren't you singing? Man, impact group, it was kind of boring today. Well, why weren't you engaging in the discussion? Man, we haven't had many people get saved at this altar call. Well, when's the last time you brought somebody to church? When's the last time somebody showed up here because of you? A lot of times it's the church's fault. But the reality is that you and I are the church. We make up the church. Recently I heard a preacher say, he said, man, a lot of our Slavic churches especially will go on mission trips to Mexico. Right? Have any of you guys ever been to a mission trip to Mexico? I've been on a couple mission trips to Mexico. Like, we'll organize teams and we'll go down to Mexico. right? We'll go down to Tijuana or some of the border towns. And we'll go out and we'll start doing all this awesome ministry. We'll start preaching to people. We'll hit the streets. We'll hand out pamphlets and brochures. And we'll do all of this evangelism. We'll organize conferences and crusades and everything else. Right? When we go to Mexico, we're on fire. But the reality is there's like 1,000 Hispanics in your school that don't even know you're a Christian. And that's the kind of lives that we live. We'll run away to South America and preach the gospel and be on fire for Jesus. But the reality is that people in your school don't even know you're a believer. But I haven't grown because of Andre or the worship team or the church or somebody else. Right? We always find fault with somebody else. There was a guy once. He was flying a little plane and his plane crashed. Crashes in the ocean. He swims to an island and he sets up shop. He's like, "What are you going to do? I can't swim back to my homeland. I'm going to start my own life here on this little island." Years and years and years. Think Castaway, right? Years and years and years go by, and he's on this little island, and suddenly he sees a ship. And he lights a little fire. He starts waving his little palm leaves and, screaming. And the captain of the ship spots him. And, he lets down a little motorboat and he said, "Hey, go save this guy. He's on an island." And so they pick up this guy. They bring him back and they bring him up onto the ship. And, he's like, "Oh my goodness, I haven't seen people in years. I've been alone for, 20 years now. I can't take it anymore. I'm so overwhelmed seeing you guys. Thank you so much for saving me." And so they're all talking and the captain says, "While you're kind of getting accustomed to everything that's happening, I have a question to ask you. I can't help but notice that on this island, I see 3 buildings. Did you build those?" And he said, "Yeah, I built those. I've been here for 20 years and I built all 3 of those. I'm actually really proud of myself. I built 3 nice buildings." And he said, "Just out of curiosity, what are those buildings?" He said, "Well, that first building there, that's actually my house. Yeah, I live there. It's 2 stories. I have a staircase in there. I built a 2-story house." And he said, "All right, what's the second building?" And he said, "Well, the second building," says, "that's my church. That's where I go to worship, and I go there to experience God and encounter God, and I have such a powerful time, and it's just me and God. It's special." And he's like, "Well, what's the third building?" He said, "Oh, that's my old church. I don't go there anymore because I didn't like the style of services." And he was alone. But that's how we are. That's the kind of people we are. We're always looking for someone to blame. Right? Like, I showed up to church. I didn't get filled. I didn't get filled. My wife and I, we like cooking shows. So right now we're watching MasterChef. Any cooking show fans? Yeah? All right. So Chopped fans, anyone? All right. A couple people. Cool. So we like cooking shows. We probably like them more than like movies. Cooking shows it's where it's at. And so we watch cooking shows, and we also enjoy cooking. We like making our own food. Sometimes we order those little boxes. And anyone done the little box? Yeah, you guys have done little kits. You guys have one that you like? I feel like HelloFresh is where it's at, but to each their own. But we really like trying different things, different recipes. We enjoy cooking. I'm going to share something with you guys that'll help you in your cooking career, if that's what you're interested in doing one day. Do you guys know where the greatest chefs in the world come from? Anybody? Greatest chefs, what's the culinary capital of the world? They have the most cooking schools, the greatest chefs of the world. What is it? France. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can say it like that too, France. Yeah, France. That's the cooking capital of the world. Number 1 cooking capital of the world. A group of French chefs, some of the best on the planet, were interviewed, and they were asked, "What is the secret ingredient to making meals taste good?" And they all kind of talked with each other. And they came back, and they said, we actually all had a consensus. We're all in agreement here. There is one ingredient that is guaranteed to make meals taste amazing. There's one ingredient that will absolutely, we can guarantee, if this ingredient is present, every single meal you make will be delicious. And the interview was like, so all of you guys agree? There was like 6 of them. It's like all 6 of you agree that this is the key ingredient to transforming every meal into something amazing? And they all looked at each other. And they're like, yeah, if you have this one thing, every meal you serve will be amazing. And they're all like, oh, what is it? There's like so much anticipation. What is it? And the spokesman, he picks up the microphone. He goes, hunger. If you have hunger, every meal will be amazing. Friend, let me ask you this. Sometimes you come to church and you're like, man, the sermon wasn't very good. Like that didn't do anything for me. That didn't fill me up. Or that prayer wasn't very good. It didn't fill me up. Or that worship. We use this term a lot in Slavic churches. Fill me up, like God fill me, right? That worship, I didn't get filled. The problem wasn't with the worship. The problem wasn't with the sermon. The problem was not with the prayer. The problem was that you weren't hungry. Because Jesus said, all who are blessed are those who hunger, because they will be what? Yeah, filled, satisfied. They will be satisfied. So if you show up to service not hungry, not thirsty, it's no surprise that you're leaving saying, man, I didn't get filled. It's because you showed up to church already full. We show up to church a lot of time already full of ourselves, full of our ego, full of our sins. I mean, that's the reality. That's how a lot of us live. That's how a lot of us operate. You know what a lot of Christians look like? How many of y'all cook with microwaves while we're talking about food? Any of you guys use microwaves at home? So, some of you guys, right? Here's what I've learned about microwaves. Have you ever had like a bowl of soup or borscht, and it's like a nice big bowl, and you put it in the microwave, and you put it on like a minute and a half, and you hit the start button, and you're like sitting there watching it spin. It's like, bzzz, and it's like, microwaving. It's doing what it needs to do. And for a minute and a half, you're just sitting there watching it. And you open the microwave door, and it's steaming. It's like the soup is steaming. Oh, you're like, man, praise God. You like take your bowl of soup out. You put it on the table. You put your little bib in your shirt. You got a nice hunk of bread. And you drop your sour cream in there. And you take a big old bite. And it's ice cold. It's ice cold. This happens a lot. You'll heat something up real quick, but it's still cold inside. Friends, that's a lot of Christians. That's a lot of Christians that haven't grown. They walked into a service one time. They came to a Bible study. They came to prayer night. They connected with a leader, and they got inspired for a bit. But a lot of that is superficial. Growth isn't just what you see on the outside. Growth is what happens on the inside. There are a lot of worship leaders, youth leaders, preachers, and pastors who still haven't grown. Growth is something that happens here, not with this, not with the microphone. Growth happens on the inside. Have you ever thought about when you drive through a desert or like a desert town, and you'll see a cactus? And it'll be like this big, beautiful green cactus, and there's no other vegetation growing around it. Have you ever thought to yourself, why is this cactus, or how is this cactus growing and thriving? The secret is this. All other plants, they'll have roots, like a little fibrous root system that goes out maybe a foot or two. A cactus can have a root system that goes over 30 feet deep. It gets deeper and deeper and deeper until it finds some water, until it finds a source of life. Because the cactus knows, before I can grow upward, my roots, my foundation, has to grow downward. Are you the keyboard guy? Bro, let me tell you something about you playing those keyboards. Man, that sounded pretty good. Yeah. Why don't you? Yeah. What's your name? Taras? What's your last name? Oh, okay, cool. I don't know, you like have a familiar look. This guy's good, huh? On the piano, he got those little like. Let me tell you, a keyboard player is good when they have a laptop on the keyboard. That, for me, that's next level. I don't know what that's for. Maybe that's just like for Netflix or something. But if you have a laptop on the keyboard, in my eyes, you are a professional. So, man, praise God that we have good people, that can lead us in worship. So, friends, I just have one or two more thoughts, and we're going to pray. We talked about a few things that prevent us from growth. And here's the last one. You know what the last thing is that prevents you and I from growing? It's past progress. It's past progress. It's, you and I, we experienced the grace of God at one point in our lives, and we were so excited about it, and it was so good, and it was such a great moment and such a great experience, and we begin to live in that. We begin to live in that, and we stop looking towards the future. I remember when I was taking a history class one time in high school, I was reading about. Oh man, we were like rebooting and everything. All right. I was reading about when the pilgrims came to America, and that was a fight, right? That was a challenge. That was incredible what they had to go through. They had to cross seas. They had to. The challenges that they faced with their former government. And when they arrived here in America, they started building a colony. I don't know what the distance is from America to England. I think it's like a lot of miles. And they arrived here and they built their little colony. I don't remember what it is. It's like 7,000 or... Does that sound right? 7,000 or 700? I mean, there's a 7 there somewhere. And they developed this colony, and it was amazing. Within several years, the mayor of the little town, one of the first little towns, he said, guys, all we've experienced is this tiny little piece, this tiny little portion of America, this tiny little bit, this little coastal town. I propose that we travel 7 kilometers inland, that we go a little deeper and see what we can find. He was removed from office. He was impeached. I think they even threatened him with prison. Like, why are you threatening our way of life? We've already made it. We've gone as far as we need to go. This is it. We've seen what we need to see. But he had a vision. He said, there has to be more than this. There's got to be something more than this. He had a vision for his life, for his family, for their future. We have to go deeper. We have to go farther. And friends, you and I mean, we're probably sitting there thinking, man, that's so silly. Remove him from his post. We're comfortable where we are. We don't want anything else, but that's a lot of us in the church. We experienced our past progress, and we become comfortable with where we are. Friend, I would challenge you to not live in your past progress. We're all guilty of this. Sometimes you'll hear our parents say, when I was your age, our services, our prayers, they were so powerful, right? Like sometimes we'll hear this. Even me, I was a youth pastor for 10 years. And God forgive me, but there were moments in my ministry where I would tell our youth, man, I remember when we were just starting out, we had such powerful prayers. And God would convict me. Like, Oles, why are you dwelling on past progress? You need to be looking towards the future. You need to be looking at your next steps. If yesterday was greater than today, what are you going to do about tomorrow? Because something needs to change. If yesterday was greater than today, you need to change something so that your tomorrow is greater than yesterday. There needs to be something more. There needs to be something bigger. Friend, this applies to every area of life, but especially to your spirit. Especially to your spirit. Especially to your spirit. I mean, friends, a lot of us, we get so comfortable, we stop reading our Bibles. We stop praying together. Our level of worship, it just falls apart. One theologian once said, if every American in America opened their Bible at the same time, we'd have the greatest dust storm this continent has ever seen. If we all cracked open our Bibles at the same time. Because that's a lot of us. That's a lot of us. 2,000 years ago, the Bible was in its original form. It was just starting to be distributed. But the Spirit of God was moving in such an awesome way amongst the believers. Today we have 14, 15 Bibles on our shelves. But the issue is that they're not being read. They're not being studied. They're not being absorbed. They're not being fed on. And so you and I, we're not growing. Have you grown? Because health, your spiritual health, is directly related to your growth. If you are not growing, then you are not a healthy Christian. You are not a healthy Christian. Friends, why don't we stand? Can we just pray over this for a few moments? Can we just ask God to do a work in our lives? That if these words, if they spoke to you tonight, that God would allow them to take root in your life. That He would use them to grow you as a believer. That He would use them to just change your way of thinking, change your way of life. Friends, there is so much potential in this room. So many incredible young people that can do wonders for the glory of God.